Okay, entrepreneurs, this one is for you. You know I'm all about making your brand work for you, and this is where Sticker Giant comes in. They get it. Whether you're a small business, a creative freelancer, or someone just starting out, Sticker Giant wants to help you tell your stories with custom stickers and labels. They really make your products look pro, your packaging pop, and your brand stick in people's minds, literally. So if you're ready to take your brand to the next level, visit stickergiant.com and become part of the KMA community by using code KMAPodcast25 at checkout on stickergiant.com to get 25% off your first order. See how they can help you bring your ideas to life. You definitely won't regret it. Sticker Giant, your partner in creating brag-worthy branding. Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. Today's solo episode is for the person who's considering a rebrand and has not been able to pull the trigger. These are your 10 most common rebranding questions answered. As always, if you love the episode, don't forget to send it to a friend. Send it to someone whose branding desperately needs a redo and who needs to work with us. We would really appreciate that. Or save it for later, knowing that you've got MKW Creative Co. at the top of your list for rebranding opportunity in the new year and beyond. Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Kiss my aesthetic, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Okay, so these are the 10 most common rebranding questions that I get as a brand designer. I think this episode will be helpful for you if you've really been on the fence about branding or rebranding, or you're a creative who is just like curious what questions I'm getting asked all the time. So I wanted to create this episode as a touch base for us to really talk about some of those bigger questions and how that can inform the process or even give you ideas on what to expect when embarking on rebranding. So, first and foremost, what is rebranding and how does it differ from a brand refresh? That's question number one. So, rebranding is when we are sitting down and taking a full audit of everything that your brand influences. That can be client touch points, that can be merch, that could be print, digital, social, web, branding. We are taking everything basically on the table, putting all the cards out and figuring out if there is an alignment between who you say you are, who you help, and how you help them, right? This is different, in my opinion, than a brand refresh. A brand refresh is all those things are staying the same. We just want to update our look. And for our team, a brand refresh is going to be quoted differently than a rebranding. Rebranding is usually happening at a major milestone or some kind of turning point, a merger, an acquisition, a shift, a pivot, versus a brand refresh. Like I would consider what we do to like our website and our socials once every year is like a brand refresh that can be changing seasonally, annually, etc., which is, maybe we'll adjust our colors slightly. We might swap a font or two. We might make some adjustments to the logo, but on the whole, things are going to stay the same. So the biggest distinction, again, is not just, oh, I want a new look because I'm bored, but it's I've got some kind of reason to take on this new aesthetic or because what I currently have doesn't work for me anymore. And that really leads into question number 2. When should a company consider rebranding? So a rebrand happens typically, when what you've got isn't cutting it. A lot of times people will come to us for rebranding because the branding that they invested in initially doesn't have enough robust elements, different logos, different use cases, opportunities for expansion. Like it doesn't have legs to it, right? So a lot of times when people come to us, the branding that they had previously, they did on a budget or they DIY'd or they made it with Canva, or they didn't fully understand how to execute the branding across all the touch points. So they want to undergo rebranding to really get that strong alignment between who they are, what they do, who they're trying to help, and how they help them with their service or product. So that's really where the rebranding is coming about. Rebranding also typically happens when you're in a change in the business. So let's say you're bringing on more team members and you need more branding assets to then help them do their job well, or you're hitting a major like timeline milestone. 5 years in business, 10 years in business. Let's say your processes have changed or your services have changed. You used to offer XYZ and now you offer ABC. So the branding for XYZ no longer fits the business. A rebrand might also happen when you are adding or taking away partners of the business. So if you started a business with your best friend and now you're not best friends anymore, and so you need to undergo a rebranding, or there's a merger or an acquisition, you've partnered with another business, you've expanded your offerings, you've found a way to create more for your ideal client, and therefore the branding needs to talk to them differently. Also consider rebranding when your ideal client has changed. A lot of businesses go through a metamorphosis and maybe, you used to be a social media manager and website designer and now you realize you really just want to build sales pages. That's a shift in business and so your service is different, so you'd undergo a rebranding to make sure that the way you're presenting yourself is communicating that you only do this now, right? Question number 3 is, what are the key steps involved in a rebranding process? Like I said, a rebrand is a real audit of all the brand touch points. So we're talking about customer journey. How does someone go from a stranger to a VIP? We're talking about process, onboarding, offboarding, tools, client touch points such as like gifting or handwritten notes, merchandise. Those are all the different things that are going to come into play. And we want to audit all of those. So we want to throw it all on the table so that when we are coming up with a rebranding scope, that we are considering all of those different pieces and parts. The next kind of step involved in rebranding is making sure that we have all the correct information, that we're doing good discovery process. And this is going to come about on our side, through our long form brand questionnaire and strategy session. And that's where I'm sitting down with the decision makers on the project, often the founders, but not always, to really make sure that we understand what you're going for and how we're going to get there. And that's going to come about through conversation and through pushing and kind of nudging to figure out, okay, where are the pain points? Where's our opportunities for growth? Who are the competitors and what are they doing? So that's coming about in strategy. Then once we have the strategy, we will get into designing the aesthetics and defining the brand. So those are kind of the key steps. There's a really good episode I recorded that's our brand design process and how it works. That will be really helpful to you. But those are really kind of the foundational elements of a rebrand. Auditing everything, then strategy, then design. And then after design, implementation, right? How does this rebrand get rolled out? How do we take this from idea to execution? And our team really loves doing that with clients. Question number 4, how can rebranding impact a company's market position? A zillion. Like, the answer to that is really endless, right? So rebranding can really impact a company's market position by asserting the clientele that you serve and the quality of service that you provide. The first company that comes to mind in this project is the Falker Van Gallagher real estate group that we've been working with. And there's a few episodes with Sarah, who's the marketing manager who ended up hiring our team to help with that rebranding effort. And what we noticed in the rebranding was really helping them position their real estate group as a heritage brand, a legacy brand, and not just a lifestyle brand. So that looked like different types of visual cues and visual elements, better social media graphics, better website, better branding, better client gifting to really solidify that brand as like, hey, we've been here a long time and we intend to be here for a long time. So we used a lot of different visual cues and markers to communicate that. Another way that rebranding could impact your company's market position is asserting you as the expert. We noticed this with Enlight Hyperbarics. Their logo beforehand was very arts and crafts and maybe a bit juvenile. What we ended up giving them at the end of the process was a brand that really helps solidify them as thought leaders. It's modern, it's tech forward, it has the level of professionalism, but also the level of warmth that they were looking for, and helped them communicate their more complicated products and services with this brand language and visual style that connected that client into the business. The last one that I can think of here of our recent work is how we helped Amador Wine Country really position themselves in opposition to Napa. So this is a project that we're going to be sharing here shortly on our social medias and in our portfolio. But what was most interesting about taking on that project was how to create it as a one of one category. How do we rebrand this wine district in Northern California to really be something unique from what's out there and an offer that's different for the potential clientele who is interested in wine and wants to kind of get their feet wet in that world, but it feels priced out of Napa, feels like not of that kind of level of too fancy, too snooty, too unapproachable. And how do we make the opposite of that? So the branding for Amador is much more connected to the history and the rustic and the industriousness of the people that live there, that help their market position because it puts them in opposition to their competition as something totally separate, right? Not as we're not trying to copy, but we're trying to be a category one of one. What are the potential risks and benefits of rebranding? The benefits are endless. Benefits is increased ROI, increased brand recognition, increased impact, increased connection to your client. There are risks. The risks with rebranding when done poorly is that you lose people, right? So, undergoing a rebrand, if it's not done well, causes a lot of market confusion and causes a lot of clients to be skeptical of what it is that you offer. So when we're doing the branding, this is why it's so important to have that deep discovery and deep design phase, strategy phase section, because that's going to help ensure that we don't alienate people. So we need to really be cognizant of that and be aware of how when people perceive change, they usually don't like it. It's very common human behavior that we don't like to see things change, right? So being ahead of that and really the messaging I've explained to clients when they're undergoing a rebrand is that their outward message, their audience is thanks for reminding us who we are. Now we have a look to match. So making it more about like we're pulling inspiration from our community and we're pulling inspiration from our clientele and we want to have branding that looks the way that it feels to work with us. That's always the goal with branding and rebranding. How do we create something that visually looks the way that it feels to use our product or to enjoy our services, right? How do we measure the success of a rebranding effort? This is a question that I get on discovery calls like once in a blue moon, which is how am I going to ensure an ROI on this process? And the complicated thing about branding or rebranding is that you can never truly get an apples to oranges comparison because you can't do a split audience on a rebrand, right? You can't say, oh, we've only rebranded to these half of the people and we didn't rebrand to these half of the people and then we will measure it and then decide. It's either you're doing it or you're not doing it. It's like very binary. It's like we're either changing everything or we're keeping everything the same. So to measure the success of a rebranding effort is a bit elusive. That being said, there are ways that you can start to measure metrics relating to rebranding. That could look like website clicks. That could look like exposure, reach, impressions, testimonials, just general sentiment, like emotional sentiment towards the brand, increased referrals. These are all things that come over time. So it could be that these are related to the rebranding, but there could also be a lot of other reasons why people could feel more positively about your brand. So it is a bit difficult to say for sure that we will be able to measure the success of your rebranding effort. Like hard, right? Unless you're doing a bunch of polling, unless you're collecting a bunch of data. It's one of those things that rebranding is a more emotional decision. It is a more hard to measure kind of sensory, but also elusive effort. It's I always tell people I'm in the business of vibes because that's what it is, right? It's like how do we create and curate the vibe of whatever it is that you're trying to do, who you're trying to serve, how you're trying to help them. So a little more difficult, but not undoable, right? What we're looking for I'm always looking for measuring the success of a rebrand is do the people who work in and with the company now feel more confident working with and for the company? That is a huge indicator. So usually people will come to us for a rebranding because what they have is not working. So they are hitting their head against the wall, they're feeling stuck, they feel inconsistent, they feel like their branding doesn't convey the vibes that they're going for. And so by the end of that rebranding effort, what we're looking for, the transformation that my team is looking for is are the founders more proud of the business? Is the team more empowered to create content on behalf of the company? Are the outside partners and opportunities more aligned because you're showing up the way that they could see themselves aligning with your business. So, for example, like a lot of the travel influencers that we work with, I always like to ask them, who are your dream hotel collabs? And how do we make sure that we create branding for you that if it was your business X Four Seasons, your business X Ritz Carlton, that that looks like it belongs together and you don't look like amateur hour, but you look like you can hold your own next to some of those ideal brand partners. And Jet Set Christina was a great example of that. She's had incredible partnerships since undergoing her rebranding. And that's another way that we can start to measure the success of the rebrand is in those number of opportunities. Number 6. That was number 6. How do you measure the success of a rebranding effort? Number 7, what costs are associated with rebranding? So, my typical rule of thumb and general observation from branding and rebranding efforts we've done is that brands should budget between 10 and 15% of their annual revenue towards a rebranding budget. What that means is if your business is making $100,000 a year, it's a good idea to set aside 10 to 15K towards rebranding. That is a proportionate budget to your business size. And that again is very flexible based on the business, right? If you're making 500,000, if you're making a million, 5 million, etc., those are all different benchmarks. And that to me, that 10 to 15% feels most consistent and most approachable with the kind of businesses that we're working with. The reason is the bigger the business, the more touch points and the more design that you're going to need, right? So that could encapsulate rebranding, that could encapsulate podcast, media, content, website, blogs, print design, merch, physical, signage, etc., events. Like there's so many different touch points that could use the touch. And what I'm always advising people to do is within that 10 to 15% budget, then siphon it out to where you want the most effort. How much of that goes towards social? How much of that goes towards branding? How much of that goes towards web, towards your other events, pop-ups, activations, etc. That gives people a good kind of like measuring point. And then from there, you can scale up or scale back based on your sales, right? So let's say you're coming up on 2026, you're like, we really need to rebrand next year. Looking at that budget then will also help you narrow down on a team that can help you at that budget. So we get a lot of people that come to us that maybe have $2,000 for their full rebranding. That's not a project size that we will be able to take on. What I would recommend to them is like, hey, go work with someone for your budget to get you from where you're at to the point where you could spend 10, 15, 20, $30,000 to work with us because we can't take on a project for less than 7 because of our experience, our client load, our process, our team members, all of those things. And what we believe to be the bottom line impact on your business. So it's about finding those right people in the right place. That being said, you could find a total diamond in the rough and really hit it rich with a design team at a very low price point and grow with them. That's also an option. But if you're wanting to work with us, again, we're going to have that minimum budget. We're going to have that minimum requirement to be able to access our team and our talent and our network. So, costs associated with rebranding, it's really the wild, wild west. There's so many designers at so many different price points. There's so many agencies at so many different price points. But remember, you're not only paying for the design service, you're paying for their years of expertise and you're paying for access to their network. So, keeping those things in mind, those budgets are going to vary greatly. How can rebranding affect existing customer perceptions? Question number 8. So, rebranding can really help to solidify and I almost want to say like diversify what a client thinks of you and of your brand. The one that comes to mind here is Gallivant Society. So, Gallivant Society previous to the rebrand was very DIY, and Allie will tell you that. Go back and listen to her episode. But mismatched between the level of branding and the level of service. There's this like huge valley between how they were presenting themselves online and how people were experiencing the brand. So in the rebrand effort, what we did to actually affect those existing customer perceptions is really position those insiders, those diehards that have been with the brand since day one as the VIPs and as the brand ambassadors. So in the rebrand, they got invited to the brand reveal party, for example. At that brand reveal party, they got a swag bag. In the swag bag, they got all the different branded pieces, the notebooks, the luggage tags, the bags, the scarf. Really, really key here about the scarf, the silk scarf. So there's a general Gallivant Society silk scarf, and then there are silk scarves for every trip that you go on. So what we did to help solidify the brand for existing customers was create an incentive to want to keep going on the trips, to want to keep being involved, to want to stay plugged in, and really give them branding that they were proud of wearing. So the rebranding here is affecting those existing customers by saying like, oh shit, they are leveling up. And now this is something that like I got in on the ground floor and now I get to be a part of it ongoing. And that's been a really fun transition to see how well Gallivant Society, the audience, has been able to really embrace the new look and feel and see themselves in the new branding as part of that founding member community. And I think that's really where a lot of clients of ours and brands can take inspiration from is if you do have that existing customer base, how do you keep them involved? How do you keep them as part of your world? How do you honor them? And how do you celebrate them and thank them for being with you, even when you looked like a hot mess disaster? Question number 9, what role does company culture play in a successful rebrand? Company culture is everything to a rebrand because we've all heard the horror stories of the companies that rebrand and the culture of the company is not at all reflected in the new look and feel and how much of a disconnect it can be for the people that work at the companies to feel like they got slapped with branding that doesn't represent them. Opposite of that, I think a lot of how our rebrand with Falkreeve and Gallagher was about pulling in those team opinions, pulling in the style, pulling in the history of the place, pulling in and making sure that each of those people felt celebrated and felt incorporated into part of the brand. So similarly to Gallivant Society, we unveiled the branding for Falkreeve and Gallagher at their like team appreciation dinner. And we said, this is for you, because of you, and with you. And it is not like in opposition to who you are and how you operate within this company. It's really important that in a rebranding effort, we're pulling forward the company culture from the internal team side, but also, like I said in the last answer, is like, who are those ambassadors? Who are those VIPs? Who are the people who are going to talk about your business and recommend your business ongoing, right? So the culture has to really come through, and those culture and core values are something that should be bubbling up to the surface quite often throughout not only the rebranding phase, but ongoing with the brand. I think about this with our brand, right? So how does our company culture and our beliefs and our morals and our ethics reflect not only our company, but reflect our clientele? So company culture and making sure that the rebrand is kind of like holding a mirror to your people is of the utmost importance. Question number 10, how long does the rebranding process typically take? This is a big, lofty one. I can talk from our own experience, which is our rebranding process typically design-wise, so that would be strategy and design, takes about 2 months. Implementation takes about 4. So the timeline that we're giving people these days is like, this is a 6-month commitment to work with us, and that's going to cover everything from your strategy to your brand positioning, all of your brand assets to brand guidelines, brand execution. So the execution side would look like website, social, print, digital, merch, events, etc., and making sure that all of that goes smoothly so that the brand can actually function on its own without our help is a 6-month kind of start to finish process. And if you're looking for help with something like that, we would love to work with you. So little shameless plug here. Work with MKW Creative Co. on your rebranding, and we'd love to get that all the way through for you and even to ongoing. What we do now as well is work with clients in that creative direction, ongoing retainer capacity, which is a nice way to kind of use us and utilize us as your outsourced creative department to make sure that all of those efforts are executed consistently and don't have to stop just after the 6 months. So without further ado, please, if you love the episode, don't forget to send it, save it, share it, send it to a friend, leave a comment on Spotify or on YouTube. Don't forget to join the Facebook group, Kiss My Aesthetics, same name as the podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.